How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be covering a bit of a hot tuning topic that's been making the rounds lately. I'm sure many of you have been seeing videos about how you should change settings to max out rotational G numbers, particularly with camber. While this can be a good starting point, I'm going to show you that it's not always accurate. But before we get started, if you find videos like these helpful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So let's look at the base setup that we have here. Again, we're in the Mazda Tenza Nürburgring GP, since I have this car pretty dialed in here for 630 pp races. The setup link is in the description for those who are interested. What we're going to do is set the camber based on maximum rotational G, set a baseline lap, and then compare it to the camber settings I thought worked the best for this track. To start, I'm going to make 6th gear one click longer so that the rotational G value at 150 miles an hour is populated. The PP value increases significantly despite no real performance gain here, and I've linked a video showing why that's the case in the description, but that's not too important here. But you can see here that we're going significantly lower on camber to get maximum rotational G. Now I'm a big proponent of low camber in general on the game. You can see that in my setups that I've released so far, but there are cases where the maximum rotational G doesn't give you the fastest setup for a particular car or track, and this combination of car and track just happens to be one of those cases. I'm sure there are many more, but more testing is needed to find out for sure. And that seems like the max rotational G we can get, so let's go with that. Also keep in mind that this setup is fairly stiff all around, from springs to roll bars, so we have minimal body roll, and we have near maximum downforce. All of those characteristics work well with lower camber setups, so we should have a good setup here according to the simulation. Now that we have the setup, let's run a good lap and see what we can get. I have a pretty good idea of what a good lap is around here since this setup was first in the top 10 stars when it was the best car for the daily race here, but I put a good amount of time into lapping each setup just to make sure it's the setup and not the driver making the difference. I tend to reset quite a bit when hot lapping, so ignore the lap counter here. And with the low camber setup, we crossed the line with a 201.1. Not a bad time, but I know the car has more in it. The car felt predictable to drive, and the feedback I got from the handling was pretty good with low camber, but it felt like it gave up mid-corner and started to understeer earlier than I expected. Now we'll go back to the setup that I made originally. We've added back 0.7 degrees of camber in the front, 1.4 degrees in the rear. You can see that our rotational G has actually dropped by 0.01 to 0.03 across the board. Not a big difference, but a difference nonetheless. Based on the game's simulated performance, the setup should be slower than the one with low camber. But let's run another lap and see if that's true. As I run the lap, I'll display deltas for each sector. So as we get into the first sector, the difference might not be apparent right away, but the car is more willing to turn in and it doesn't have nearly as much of that giving up feeling mid-corner as the low camber setup does. It's fairly even through most of this sector, but the car has a lot more potential on the exit, so we end up about a tenth ahead of the low camber Ghost. The middle two sectors really benefit from the additional camber, so watch out for the time deltas there. And as we cross the line, we run a 2-minute .5, significantly faster than the lower camber setup. If we look at the sector splits, we gain time in every single sector from this change, even though the game predicted that this setup would be slower. There were mistakes on both laps, but a difference of almost 6/10 more than covers that. The car rotates more on and off throttle, and we can catch any oversteer by applying throttle as always in a 4-wheel drive car. This effect may not be as pronounced on rear-wheel drive cars, but it's definitely worth testing on your own time. So, why are the numbers lower, even though it's faster in practice? To be honest, it's anyone's guess, unless we're told exactly how these numbers are calculated. It's possible that the game runs simulations on a fictitious track with corners that are biased towards settings like these, at least that's how I've poked some holes in tuning on Forza, so I can't say for sure because I just don't know enough, but there's definitely a hole in the simulation somewhere. That being said, I think the lap time difference speaks for itself, and it's safe to say that the rotational G numbers aren't 100% reliable. While I'm sure that tuning based on rotational G numbers works in a lot of cases, I'm also sure that there are more cars and tracks where those numbers fall apart a bit. So the only way to be sure you're getting the most out of your car is testing changes back to back and seeing what's fastest. But that's all I've got for this time, guys. If you found this information interesting, again, please like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, part 2 of my suspension guide is in the works, and that's where I'll cover camber as well as toe and roll bars, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you haven't seen part 1 already, I'll link that in the description as well. If you have any questions or comments about this video, please put them below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.